I'm Jeff Matlow. Welcome to the best leadership podcast ever. Welcome to the pod. If you're new here, it is lovely to be tickling your eardrums. You may want to click that subscribe button so you are kept updated of all the episodes, because you're going to love this one and you're going to love all of them. I know it. I can feel it. For those who have been here before, it's great to have you back. This is the most fun way to learn life's leadership lessons. My name's Jeff Matlow. I am a 3-time entrepreneur, an author, a keynote speaker, and I coach people. They call me their leadership therapist. What I do is I help you be the most productive person you can be and drive your team to success. If you're interested in that, reach out to me, leadership@bytitleonly.com. But enough about that. What I want to talk about right now is the harsh reality of truth, trust, and transparency. And it starts, oddly enough, with this guy called William Miller. Back in 1899, he was a 21-year-old bookkeeper, and he started an investment firm called the Franklin Syndicate. Now, he claimed to have this insider knowledge of companies and their stocks. And this insider knowledge actually led to incredibly remarkable 10% weekly return for his investors. And it actually earned William the nickname 520% Miller, because 520% is the return they were getting in a year. Needless to say, the Franklin Syndicate's business grew really darn fast. But when growth leveled out, as it always does with every company, William Miller began having trouble paying his investors their weekly interest. And nobody knew why, except William. You see, William Miller wasn't telling the truth. He hadn't been making stock investments after all. Instead, he was simply using the new investments into his firm to pay off previous investors. The Franklin Syndicate was a castle of cards, and a tornado came a-blowin'. Miller was arrested. He was convicted to 10 years in prison, at which point his nickname probably should have been downgraded to 0% Miller, but I guess that's just a lost opportunity, isn't it? Now, you've probably never heard of William Miller until now. But 20 years after William, an Italian-American in Boston ran the same scheme as Miller. His name was Charles Ponzi. You've heard of him, and that's how the Ponzi scheme came about. As a leadership coach, I deal with truth and communication issues all the time. And one of the most common communication issues at companies of all sizes is a lack of transparency. Contrary to what many leaders think, transparency isn't just about being nice. It's a requirement to build a productive, inspiring, and high-growth company. In fact, employees in transparent workplaces have up to 6 times more job satisfaction than other employees. In other words, happy employees are more productive employees. So if you want your team to be productive and high-performing, which I'm hoping you do, it's time we took a little look at your fluency with transparency. Now, sure, William Miller's failure to be truthful might be a bit of an exaggerated example. After all, you're probably not running a Ponzi scheme, right? Right? Please tell me you're not running a Ponzi scheme. Anyway, my point is that bad things happen when transparency is missing. Let me give you a real-world example. One of my clients, a $50 million service company, they laid off 5 employees for performance and restructuring issues. They only had about 50 people at the company, so this layoff actually represented 10% of a staff reduction, which is fairly meaningful, right? Now, the firings, completely coincidentally, coincided with the departure of one of their mid-sized clients. The two things, the client leaving and the layoffs, they had nothing to do with each other. Now, normally, in a culture of transparency and truthfulness, these coinciding events wouldn't cause any issues. But that's not what happened here. The leadership team was scared to scare the staff, so they weren't transparent. In fact, nobody in leadership talked to the staff about the layoffs. Nobody talked about the client who left. There was no notice, there was no announcement, there was nothing. To the employees, it felt like a cover-up. Naturally, the staff started freaking out because in the absence of facts, humans will make up their own stories and they're rarely ever good. The staff ended up attributing the firings to the loss of the client, and they made the assumption, though it was an incorrect assumption, but they made the assumption that the company was a sinking ship. Everybody was scared that they'd be the next one to be fired because there was no reason given for why the other people were fired. And within a month, nearly half of the employees in the company were actively looking for jobs. The company culture, which was already teetering from a kind of lack of transparency, took a complete nosedive. And that's when I was brought in to fix it. And that's when I instructed the leadership team that transparency and truthfulness are critical components of a healthy work environment. And that leads us right to your leadership style. There are two important pillars of successful leadership: trust and respect. Trust is built from transparently telling the truth. But that's where things get a little murky. You see, it's easy for me to sit here on the microphone and say, be transparent and tell the truth. It's not always easy to actually implement that effectively. I get it. I see you. Maybe your fear of conflict makes it hard for you to tell the truth. Perhaps it's your desire to be liked by everyone that impacts your transparency. Or there's a chance that your poor decision-making process changes how you talk about the facts. Whatever the issue, if you can't tell the truth, you won't get the trust. And if you don't have their trust, you won't have their respect. According to the Harvard Business Review, employees in low-trust companies are 74% more stressed, 76% less engaged, and 50% less productive than workers in trusting environments. That's nuts. So here's the bottom line. If you don't have their trust, you have a bad work environment. Now, as it turns out, there are 3 ways to build a culture of transparency and trust. These are the 3 things that you can start doing immediately. No additional training is needed. You don't have to take a course. You just have to listen for another 45 seconds. Here they are. Number 1, always explain the why. See, helping people understand what needs to be done only gives them a longer to-do list. But helping them understand why things need to happen leads to ownership and inspiration. No matter the decision, no matter the ask, make sure your team understands the why. And number 2, document it. Documenting important decisions, documenting goals and expectations, that shows commitment, trust, and transparency. As the saying goes, what gets documented gets trusted. And number 3, create a safe environment to question. Make it safe for your employees to challenge you, to challenge your beliefs, and make it okay for them to ask you to clarify your reasons. If you don't tell them the why, have it be okay that they ask you why they're supposed to do it. Heck, maybe even reward people for raising concerns and being curious. Because without facts, there is no truth, and without truth, there is no trust. William Miller's investment activities represent a failure of truth, trust, and transparency in the worst state possible. It should act as a lesson to all of us that unless you communicate transparently, the trust in your leadership is going to erode. I said it earlier, but it's worth repeating. Without facts, there's no truth. Without truth, there's no trust. So I dare you to ask yourself these 3 questions. I challenge you on this. Number 1, how clearly are you communicating your decisions? Does your team understand the why behind your actions and your decisions? And are you constantly truthful even when it's uncomfortable to tell the truth? If you start taking one small step to improve transparency, you're going to create a better, more inspiring, more productive environment. I guarantee it. Hey, if you're having communication issues at your company, if any of this resonates with you, reach out to me. More than happy to help. Leadership at by title only. And if you liked what I talked about here, you are going to love my newsletter, thebestleadershipnewsletter.com. Go there, check it out. If you're on Spotify or Apple, if you could give this podcast a review, it helps in so many ways. I appreciate you. You're the best. I'll talk to you next week.